I'm coming home by myself 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's pitch black, and I'm all alone, and standing in my lobby is a Neanderthal man. With the eyebrow ridges, you know, and hairy knuckles like this, you know. He just learned to walk erect that morning, I think. Came right to my house in search of the secret of fire, you know. A tree swinger in the lobby at 2 o'clock in the morning. A mouth breather looking at me like... He took my watch out and I dangled it in front of him, you know, because they're mollified by shiny objects sometimes. He ate it.
So Texas, the great state of Texas, of which you know if you listen to What the Frock, I'm not a huge fan, but it is the second largest state in the union, I guess. At any rate, Texas has decided that we're not going to have these COVID restrictions anymore. We're doing away with this stuff, and that's that. No more masks, no more mandates, no more shutdowns. It's up to you, the individual. If you feel like you need to wear one, you can wear one. If you feel like you need to stay home, you can stay home. If you feel like you need to not go to a business, you can not go to that business. But the government of Texas is now out of the business of telling people this. And the reactions have been about what you would expect them to be. Many people on the conservative right have been thrilled by this, inspired by this, and are hopeful that their own states will follow suit. Other states have said, "Niet." One state, California, Governor Newsom referred to it as, quote, reckless. He took to Twitter, because that's what you do these days. You go to Twitter, and he condemned Texas's decision as, quote, reckless. The funny thing about that, of course, is that people on Twitter were immediately taking him to task. When my wife told me this, I was like, who cares what he thinks? He's not the governor of Texas. He has no say in this. The whole point of all this has been that the states have the authority. The states are the ones declaring the emergencies. So if one state decides it's not an emergency anymore, well, who the hell is Gavin Newsom to decide that? California thinks that Texas should still be in a state of emergency. Anyway, people criticized him, but sadly, and I pointed this out to Rod yesterday, equally as many people were praising him for daring to say to Texas, how dare you decide to undo this? What are you, insane? What are you, crazy? Then the president got into it. The president referred to Texas's actions as, quote, Neanderthal thinking. Now, he actually said Neanderthal thinking, but look, there's two correct pronunciations of the word, Neanderthal, Neanderthal. I prefer tall. It's just, as I'm going to say later, I'm not an anthropologist. I don't care. I pronounce it Neanderthal. If that bothers you, well, hit the stop button and move on. The crazy thing about this, of course, is in the midst of all this debate in this country about respecting other people's cultures and, sorry, things rolling around the desk here, respecting other people's cultures, respecting other people's societies, and not insulting people based on what they look like or sound like and the likes. The president walks out and says, that's Neanderthal thinking. What does he mean? What does he mean by Neanderthal thinking? What he means, of course, is that Neanderthals, as you may know, were stupid, right? There's a reason why you look around anymore, you don't see any Neanderthals around. You know why? Because they were stupid. They didn't evolve like human beings did. Homo sapiens were superior in every way, and so therefore Neanderthals died out somewhere between 100,000, 40,000 years ago. By the way, if you're one of these 6,000-year people, go away. Anyway, point being that Neanderthals died out because they couldn't adapt like Homo sapiens could. That's been the long-held belief, right? More than 6,000 years ago, Neanderthals were the dumb guys. They were less than human. It's a long-time assumption. And what we've discovered in recent years scientifically is that it's an incorrect assumption. I was reading a fascinating article yesterday about atolls, the coral islands out in the Pacific Ocean, and how they're formed. Do you know how they're formed? Most textbooks will tell you it's because of a volcano that grew up and then collapsed. And now people are saying, that doesn't work. It must be some other way. The caveman trope, of course, of Neanderthals has been around as long as we've known about Neanderthals. It's become a joke in our society, right? It's become a joke that Neanderthals were stupid, that they were slow, sluggish, that they were barbarians, I guess. They couldn't adapt like human beings could. They were incapable of doing things that thinking, logical thinking and that sort of thing. And so they've become the butt of jokes in our society today.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm just a caveman. I fell in some ice and later got thawed out by some of your scientists. Your world frightens and confuses me. Sometimes the honking horns of your traffic make me want to get out of my BMW and run off into the hills or whatever.
Or whatever. Unfrozen caveman lawyer from Saturday Night Live years ago. This trope of the caveman, the Neanderthal, being stupid and incapable of rational thought, lacking in skills. We had an insurance company make an entire campaign of it. You still see it every now. It's so simple, a caveman can do it. And you remember what the joke in all that was? Do you remember that? It's so easy, a caveman could do it. But the joke in all that was that the caveman hated that saying. He'd get offended every time somebody would say that. Why? Because he wanted you to know he wasn't stupid. He was just he was just a Neanderthal. The president's intimation here when he says it's Neanderthal thinking is that Texas is stupid. Texas is dumb. Texas is doing things that he doesn't approve of. Texas is just, behind the times. Texas isn't smart like him. Texas is not evolved. That's the intimation, isn't it? Oh, look, I'm not an anthropologist, as I said earlier. I am a historian. And I truly believe that to be a historian, you do have to know a little bit in general about anthropology, archaeology, all the various ologies that go along with it. You have to know a little bit about everything to see how it all works together. But I was somewhat lacking in my knowledge about Neanderthals. I don't really know that much about them. But I went and looked. Didn't take long. Now, I didn't take a college degree course in anthropology of European Neanderthals, but here's what I learned. They weren't stupid. They were actually quite intelligent. They were probably on a par with Homo sapiens when it came to intelligence. In some ways, probably more because they were stronger physically than Homo sapiens were. And so they were able to use that strength to create things that Homo sapiens could not initially create. They made a whole group of things called Mousterian Stones tools, that would later be ubiquitously copied by early Homo sapiens. Stone tools that allowed Neanderthals to do things that we just assume that they are really not able to do. They weren't stupid. You think they were just sitting around in a cave somewhere going, When Joe Biden come to tell us what to do? You think that's what they were doing? They weren't relying on government to help them. They were learning how to do things to help themselves. And in reality, the reason that Neanderthals disappeared probably has more to do with climate change than anything else. Of course, there weren't any SUVs back then, so we can't blame capitalism for it. So, there you go. An interesting thing about Joe Biden's insult of Texas by comparing them to Neanderthals, though, is you don't have to look very far to find a couple of studies on recent in the news about Neanderthal DNA. Now, it's become a known fact in the past, 15, 20 years, that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens intermated, intermingled, as it were. And it's something like 2% of all European descendants today have Neanderthal DNA. It's a truth. It's like, hell, Stephen Colbert did a whole piece about how white supremacists aren't going to like the fact that they have Neanderthal DNA. I don't know why, but apparently white supremacists hate Neanderthals as well. Anyway, there are two sets of genes in particular that have an impact on COVID-19. One, the lesser of the two, could make it more severe. But the other one, the one that most people outside of Africa, Neanderthals, have, helps protect people from the effects of COVID-19. It gives them almost a 20% increase in the amount of protection that they would otherwise have by having this Neanderthal gene. So why would the president say of Texas, Neanderthal thinking? Well, Neanderthal thinking would be, we've got the DNA that'll help protect us. I don't know if Texas has the DNA or not. Don't care. What I do know is, if COVID is everything we've been told it is, if COVID is everything we've been threatened with it is promised that it is, we're doing everything wrong, and what difference will it make? We're told that the flu is down this year. Why? Because people are masking and social distancing, which are the two things they tell us we have to do in order to prevent the spread of COVID. But while the flu is not spreading, COVID still is. I don't know. I know this. Somebody should take the president to task for his insult of Neanderthal culture and society. People who were smart enough to invent stone tools that Homo sapiens couldn't come up with on their own. Probably because they didn't have a government telling them how to do it. Or is it possible, I suppose, that the scary grunts, those with remaining DNA of the Neanderthals that are still running around, slightly protected by the Neanderthal DNA, send the president into a tizzy and maybe having him, what's the word for it? Oh yeah, running for the hills or whatever.